Good evening. Thank y'all for being here. This is one of those strange topics that a friend of mine suckered me into starting to pay attention to about 3 years ago, and I've threatened to kill him several times since, but I found out that these people are running the future of your lives. And they're doing it in plain sight with tacit approval of your elected officials. I put this program together. It's simple. It's about, with the 3 or 4 local slides, it's a total of about 20 slides. Most people have no idea where this came from, what they are, what do they do. And it's really an interesting little study of how when government starts to pollute the market, that then it starts to become, it's kind of an amazing thing. They're actually very entrepreneurial. It's just that they're doing it with our tax money rather than out in the marketplace where they should be. I apologize, I am not a professional at this. There we go. Regionalism 101, first step. Regional councils of government. How many people here are familiar with your regional council of government?
I have a friend that works for them.
Grant writer, right?
He needs a job.
I understand. Well, I'm going to go through real quick the statutes and the background of what they are, what they do, and the last question here is just kind of a teaser because, yes, they are out of control. And most people don't even know what they're doing. What is a regional council of government? A council of government, COG, is a multi-service entity with state and locally defined boundaries that delivers a variety of federal, state, and local programs while continuing its function as a planning organization, technical assistant vital, and visionary to its member local government. Now, I find that word to be very interesting because I figured out what their visionary is, and that is they troll for government grants. That's what they do. Now you notice that they are an effective partner for state and federal governments. Except the state doesn't know what they're doing.
Who establishes them?
It's a good question. We're just getting ready to get there.
Okay.
A little history. Conceived in the 1960s, councils of government or regional councils today, I love how they, and I take this from their website because then you can know what wonderful glowing things they think of themselves. They're adept at consensus building, creating partnerships, providing services, problem solving, and fiscal management. The role of a regional council has been shaped by the dynamics and changing dynamics. Where did they come from? They're part of the Great Society program that was originally drawn out by the Johnson administration in 1965-66. That's where it started. Bottom line is the federal government sat down and they put together the war on poverty.
Right.
They realized we're getting ready to dispense or print boatloads of federal money because people are starving in the streets. But in the mid-60s, there was a certain level of turmoil in this country because we were just coming out of desegregation, and the federal government had reached the point where they really didn't trust the states. They either didn't trust them or they didn't think they were competent.
Southern states.
No, this nationwide. No, this was plugged in. There are 438 regional councils across the country. They are in every state. But they basically said, we're going to have these boatloads of money, but we need to sort of get on the ground and see how we need to have this administered. So they basically came in and set these units up with a basic charter. Didn't do a whole lot of advertising of it because they were just starting to build the machine. Now, you'll notice that it says here they operate independent of federal funding. That's if you consider administering a federal grant not being connected to federal funding, because that also is one of the biggest things they do. And then a little more history, and this just goes through something I'm going to cover in a minute, but sort of how it came about in the state of North Carolina. We actually started in 1969, was the first time the federal government then comes to the state and says, Yeah, we've got these little programs set up in all of your communities, you know, multiple counties, multiple cities. And we've got these boatloads of money. But before we're going to give you any of these boatloads of money, you're going to need to codify in legislation our little groups that we put together in your state. North Carolina has 16 different regions. They're all different shapes and sizes, and when you start digging into them, it's really funny how they morph into some really deep areas. 1969, North Carolina General Assembly Session Law. This was when they established the first setting of regional councils of government. And it was one little line in Section 6, line I, of a 54-page statute under the Department of Administration, which actually doesn't even exist, but the statute still sits there. They created the framework for regional councils. And it was like, oh, this looks good. You know, in cooperation, counties and cities, we're all going to get together and we're going to have fun. The federal government, multi-states, we're all going to work together and it's going to be lovely and we're going to have all boatloads of federal free money. Sounds good to me. And then they said, you know, this was in 1971. The federal government then came in and says, you're actually going to need to tighten that up a little bit because we're going to need to make sure that these things are properly chartered under our federal design. So from doing some digging, this actually was written by the federal government, provided to the North Carolina State General Assembly. And they said, if you don't put this exact thing in place, then we can start sending you boatloads of free federal money. Everything's connected to the free federal money. Understand, everything they do is connected to free federal money. But it goes through and it actually designed the charter of how they set up. And it was kind of, it's so loosely defined that legitimately Mint Hill and Matthews could actually sit down with an attorney with their local representative and they could form their own council of government. So fortunately they haven't figured out, you know, we'd have 50,000 more of these things running all over the country. This is the specific powers of the councils of government. Again, another thing, the federal government basically said, if you want to be doing this, you're going to need to put all these things in place. And if you just read through it, it basically says they can do anything to anybody with anything that they want to do at any time. And whoever they want to put together and do it.
The smaller the font gets, the scarier it is.
Yeah. But I'm sorry, you know, it's in the research 5 screws. But I mean, it gets into, prime example, number 4. Now let me ask you a question. How can you, to contract with the state of North Carolina, any other state, the United States of America, or any agency thereof for services? That's just really putting it in a real tight box to make sure that they can do anything to anybody with whatever they want to. And then they went on their way. Now, after you've seen all that, it's been put in place by legislation. This is an email that actually my friend Cheryl Pass over here got generated by our friend Kelly Hastings, who's one of our state reps. Because we were asking, why doesn't the state do anything about controlling these, you know, the money that they're doing? And you'll notice I highlighted one line. Now this is straight from your legislative research department in Raleigh that goes through all this stuff about, this is about the Connect Our Future program. If anybody's familiar with that, that's one of the things that they're bringing to you every day now. But they go through all that and then it says, but they're not state entities. So we really don't have, the state isn't really in the position to control what they do. Now they're codified in legislation, they use state funding, but they're not state entities. Anybody confused yet? It's by design. I have figured out in going to meetings, watching how they operate, the whole, whatever you want to call it, is by design. Confusion is their mode of operating. I mean, that's how they operate. They want you to, they don't want people showing up at their meetings because then you might actually figure out what they're doing. So, what could go wrong here? I mean, it's a voluntary compact between local governments. It's staffed by caring professionals, and I use that specifically because you go through and you start reading the stuff from like the National Association of Regional Councils. seems kind of screwy anyway. Everything, it always refers to the people that are involved in these and around these as caring professionals. You know, I really don't give a damn whether they care or not. I just don't want to be wasting money and get out of the way.
What do they care about?
That's a good question. If you can ask your friend that works for him if he is a caring professional.
I can tell you what they
And
care
it's doing the jobs that local or state governments just can't do. That is also at the NARC website probably 15 times. And I started thinking, you know, these guys might be writing the immigration bill too. Because, you know, we've got all these people in the country that won't do jobs that Americans want to do. Well, I guess there are things that... This is the scary part. They operate with no real oversight. Oh, and this is the other fun part. They can commit your local government to federal programs with minimal input from anybody. This is where I've coined my description of as the brothel for government grant prostitutes. That is what they're doing. They started out with what was probably a very noble and honorable purpose, which was to fight the war on poverty. Well, when Jimmy Carter basically drove the economy off way off the end of the cliff, federal money started to dry up. Well, if you've ever dealt with bureaucrats, there's one thing you learn about a bureaucrat. The single most important thing to a bureaucrat is figuring out how the hell am I going to have a job next year as a bureaucrat. So they became very creative. And they have started getting into all kinds of stuff. Now, this is your friendly local council of government, Central Ina. They are right down here on Tryon Street. Interesting little group of folks. It's 9 counties. They provide administrative services. They write grants. They run programs. One of the unique things that Central Ina does, they run about 80% of the government-funded, state government-funded programs for the aged in Mecklenburg County. That's one of their big places where they found, like I said, they went through this thing where all of a sudden the poverty money wasn't there, so they had to get creative. So they started going out and basically became grant figures. They do things for fee, they administer grants. They do some screwy things with their budgeting. They'll have a direct budget. Like, let's see, is it on the next one? Yeah, here's Central Ina. Okay, 1 of 16, 9 counties, 65 member governments, 41 employees, $21.7 million budget. But that doesn't include, I found out through talking to some people that have done some work, that doesn't include the dollar volume of grants and things that they just administer that they don't actually operate as pass-throughs. I had one fellow tell me he estimates the Central Ina Council of Government probably controls somewhere between $150 and $250 million in government money.
Guy, now maybe I'm missing something here, but basic math, 21,700,000 divided by 41 means their average income is $500,000.
No, that's their operating budget.
That's what they spend.
You hit on an interesting point, and it's why there used to be a gentleman named Bill Dustin who used to be the executive director of Central Ina Council of Governments. Well, we got involved, Neil Thomas, a friend of mine, because we got involved with Central Ina because they were writing our comprehensive transportation plan. Another one of the little things they offer as a service for fee to local governments. So we started digging and actually found an annual report before they started just putting the big number out there and they actually had line items. At that time, they had 24 direct employees and a $2.87 million payroll burden.
Say that again.
$100,000
24 employees, $2.87 million in payroll burden. And Neil and I decided to show up at a Central Ina Council of Government meeting one time and just happened to throw the question out. We're trying to actually track down this whole payroll burden thing within CCOG, and amazingly enough, less than 60 days later, Bill Dustin took early retirement, was no longer involved with CCOG. And I'm sure he got him a nice little gold, platinum, whatever parachute as he left the building. But they...
Why do they get government pensions?
No, they are not they are an NGO. They are a non-government organization. At least that's how they're chartered.
Okay.
I mean, it's But as I've been looking at this, I put this slide and I added a couple from another one I did. Now this is the largest population council of government in the state. 21.7 million. So I decided, well, let's go.
Well, aren't most of the members, this is a part-time job for them? Like our MUMPO?
Oh yeah, well,
This is only a part-time job.
No,
oh no, the 41, or like, here, now this is Isothermal, this is my local one. Now, we're 4 counties, one of the lowest population ones, $16 million budget. And you start looking at it and you're trying to figure out, well, how are they, how come they're only, how come in our little 4-county region, we're only getting $5 million less than Central Line is for 9 counties, largest population in the state? Budget numbers are deceiving. Most everything Isothermal does is pass through. They run a $8.2 million a year Section 8 housing slush fund. And I'm using that as a descriptive term because that's what my county commissioner who sits on the board there called. If you're in our counties of Cleveland, Rutherford, Polk, McDowell, if you have Section 8 housing, it's being done with a grant that's administered by Isothermal. But it was interesting because then I did another one that I did at Piedmont Triad, which is the largest geographical, but the 3rd largest population. And they've got a $26 million budget, but they've got theirs plugged in all sorts of different areas too. Like I said, they became very entrepreneurial and creative once the poverty money stopped coming. Now, and I captured this one screenshot because I just think that's so beautiful that they're controlling the cost of government. Now, is the best way to control the cost of government by putting a middleman in running I didn't think so either. But they run all these wonderful programs, the Central Line of Clean Fuels Coalition, Central Line Economic Development Commission, which is one of the big things that they're now moving into because we'll get to it in a minute, that's the next step. The Central Line Foundation, and that has just recently showed up, they have now started a secondary 501c3 foundation as part of Central Line. And that's been done within the last year because when I did the rundown on this not long ago, it wasn't there. Connect Our Future. Now that's this is this wonderful 14-county HUD Sustainable Communities Grant program that was probably one of the nastiest things I've seen done politically. I was at a Lake Norman RPO meeting when they first started rolling this out a year and a half ago. And RPOs and MPOs work a little different because you have a technical coordinating group, and then you have the advisory committee. The advisory committee are the elected officials who sit on the board. Technical coordinating committee is all of the staffers and planners. So they bring in all these staffers and planners. They bring in a nice little lady from NCDOT, which I'm still trying to figure out how they were handling bringing forth this HUD grant. Like I said, if you try and connect the dots, and it seems like there's always that one dot missing somewhere where you can't figure out where it gets there. She came in and did a 37-slide, 55-minute presentation to the planners and staffers. And I'm sitting there and I'm looking around the room and I'm seeing these people that are just, these are your county or city employees. And they're looking back for each other, and I watched a gentleman from MUMPO and a gentleman from Lake Norman RPO stand up and talking to each other indirectly to all the staffers says, we understand some of this may be a little bit politically uncomfortable, but don't y'all worry, we'll have all of this polished up before any of the elected officials ever see it. So sure enough, at the TAC meeting, which meets once a quarter, TCC meets either every other month or every month, depending on what they've got on the agenda, they sure polished it up because the presentation that the same lady did for the elected officials at the following TAC meeting, 4 slides, 6 minutes, and 3 of the 4 slides highlighted that we have already won a $5.4 million HUD Sustainable Communities Grant. So my county commissioner, who sits on Lake Norman RPO, said, I'm not sure we're ready to vote on this, and I watched the mayor of Troutman, North Carolina, look him in the face and said, Johnny, are you some kind of damn fool thinking we're walking away from $5+ million of free federal money?
Free.
Free.
They voted it in 15-1. They've now been doing this road show with this thing all over. If you haven't been to a road show event, if you want to see how the Delphi project works, it's perfect. They're going to ask you for your opinion, but they're going to only give you answers that fit what they want your opinion to be. But this is actually the homepage of their website. I know if you're like having trouble sleeping one night, let's go click on this and go through and see some of what they're doing. But the other side of it is, when you look at the programs they're running, then you look back at a $21 million budget, understanding how the government does it. That's how I got started down this other rabbit trail. And upon talking to somebody, I said they figured that they actually control between $150 and $200 million a year in the Metrolina region, in those 9 counties. Now, this is their funding sources and where they spend it. Now, again, it changes with every one. At Isothermal, our local council of government, 94% of their funding is federal. Centralina, 51.65% are state grants. That's because they're on that's what they administer. And those are grants for the aged, workforce development, some housing, of course, environmental protection, believe it or not, is 2.96% of their expenditures. It is a hunk of what they do. Because if it is clean air related, transportation related, they're either administering it or they're writing the grants to get the money for it. I mean, that's sort of what they've evolved into. Again, that's where I came up with my catchy phrase of the brothel for the government grant prostitutes. They have people, I know at Centralina, I was told they have 6 people that do nothing but every day go through the Federal Business Registry looking for grants that they can potentially go and market to their member governments. So they'll go in and they'll bring, and if in your neighborhood you've got a new sewer plant, if they're running new water lines and you go by and it says, thank you to the federal government for this particular Health and Human Services grant, you can pretty much bet that grant, the grant application was written by somebody at CCOG. So they not only write the grant applications, they can choose whether they're grants that they will run as pass-throughs, which they do with a lot of their state stuff, or a lot of the federal stuff never even shows up on their books, but they're getting a percentage for administering and passing it on to their local government. That's why, like I said, when you start digging into trying to figure out where they're at, they're everywhere. If it has federal or state grant money attached to it in your local community, somewhere your regional council of government's been involved. The bad part of it is that they're continually going and getting these grants for things that aren't needed or go beyond what their scope should be. And the one thing you learn when you start looking at federal and state grants, there's always a local match involved. So whatever they tell you you're getting free federal money, there's a certain amount of your local or county tax money that's actually going to have to be put with it before it gets there. That's where one of the nice, yes sir?
I also pay federal taxes too.
Oh, I know. But I'm just saying that you know, but see, you got to understand, when you talk to local politicians,
Yes, I know. We know.
their whole thing is, it's federal money, it's free. Didn't you know that?
Yeah. It's complicated.
Now, this is, like I said, this I just stumbled, I said this wasn't here, and I was doing some final stuff, put a few slides in today in the local end, and I came across the Centralina Foundation. And it is new. Thank you. Because it shocked me because I'm going down the list of them. But this is what, and I know you can't hear about. The Centralina Foundation is a nonprofit 501c3 corporation that operates as a companion organization to the Centralina Council of Governments, exclusively for the promotion of social welfare, good governance, and innovative planning for the general public in the southern Piedmont region of North Carolina. Centralina's foundation purposes are to facilitate, plan, develop, and coordinate innovative regional public service planning in areas of public concern, including but not limited to, because they never limit themselves to anything, transportation, air and water quality, public health and safety, and to further the common good and general welfare of the people in and around the region. Don't that just make you feel warm and fuzzy all inside? I mean, come on, folks.
So these guys actually our friend for the grant writers. They go out and look through all the stuff to
Correct.
find some little, oh, isn't this a feel-good project? And then they
Oh,
just throw it
exactly.
in
That's how
and
the whole Connect Our Future thing was. And then you find out what Cheryl helped uncover is the fact that that's actually being done in four of the different regions in the state. And the thing about the one here, Connect Our Future, and again, if you go back to the slide that has the charter requirements, it says that they can cross state lines.
Right.
Now, I will tell you that our friends at the North Carolina Institute of Constitutional Law are actually doing a little research on that now, because there seems to be a little question about state sovereignty and the Constitution. And the other interesting thing about Connect Our Future, I found out, and I asked, this was last week, I talked to my planner, and now this is 4 counties in South Carolina, 10 counties in North Carolina that are part of Connect Our Future. As of last week, now this is all DOT. Now understand, this is under the guise of, it's sustainable communities, but through housing or through health and human services, but it's all tied to DOT. But North Carolina and South Carolina DOT have still not had their first meeting to look at how they're going to coordinate with this $5.5 million grant. Now there's also $3 million of local match money that goes in with that $5 million. So we really didn't win $5 million, we won 5 out of 9.
You really got 2 if it's 5 and 3.
Yeah. The thing that as we watch things, as we've watched over the last several months, they've been doing these road shows. They did 46 of them throughout the region, where they would bring in 10 or 12 direct employees, 4 or 5 contract employees, had 26, I believe it was, beautiful posters. I mean, the artwork and all the people. And I sat down and started running some numbers. I figured by the time you take 10 employees to 47 different places, with some of them a half day, some of them full day, depending on how far out in the region they are, how much of that $8 million grant have you burned up just going out trying to get public consensus? But remember, the bureaucrat doesn't care. That means he's got a job next year.
Well, I'm concerned, the nonprofit that I'm working with, they've contacted us.
Wanting to know if they can help you find grants to help fund your program? Of course, that's what they do. I mean, they are the ultimate outreach from government to, and they look for, and they prefer to operate in nonprofit, because a lot of things in the books can actually be manipulated.
Well, exactly.
Well, can I add something?
Yes, ma'am.
At these road shows that they put on, they were taking surveys, supposedly to get consensus. But what they did was pack the room. They contacted every nonprofit, every government agency in the entire area, and just pulled those people in to get the whole the surveys were.
But we blew their mind in Cleveland County, because we had 32 members of our local Tea Party that showed up for the road show in Shelby. So it was
You really did make a difference in that.
Now, this is an interesting thing I just found out, because I've been starting to build this presentation more. I actually contacted them because I wanted a list I wanted their data from their public input. It's still under, that's the next step.
And they give you dire predictions of how
Oh yeah,
terrible
by the way,
the future is.
our population in the 14 county region is going to double in the next 22 years. Now,
That's good. People want to move here.
but no, if you look at the modeling from the last 50 years, it tells you that the population is actually going to grow about 12% in the next 20 years. But see, the doubling of the population makes a lot of the things that they push at the federal level more tenable. Well, we've got to plan these roads now, because we've got 22 million people in the region. We're going to have 44 million people in the next 20 years. How are we going to get them around?
I'm okay with that. I want roads. I hate but the thing is.
Oh, no. See, they don't
They want
want
roads. They want rail.
They want to stack and
rail.
pack and put you in buses
That's
and,
right.
and trains and
That's right.
shiny new things.
Exactly.
Oh, and the other thing, to foster public-private cooperation in identifying and solving local as well as regional problems affecting general welfare for the residents of the region. So everything they're doing is good.
In their opinion.
Exactly.
But,
I remember when I saw this, I was like, WTF,
Well,
what, you know.
Well, guy, you know the same guy that's got the books on the Hall of Fame has got the books on the population growth too.
Well, this is the next thing coming, my friends, and it's because some of us started asking questions. Well, they're working on some things in Raleigh right now. I hope that by the end of session, it's actually got a bill sort of sitting in finance, because that means it didn't have to pass crossover. That they're going to force any of these councils of government who accept state funding for their operational end to go to a uniform web platform. There are 16 regional councils of government on 16 different web platforms. And the first thing that I try and get people to say, well, we need to start having people just show up. I mean, they freak out when people show up. I mean, they just absolutely like, and of course I walk into my RPO meeting every month or every quarter, whether it's a TCC, I walk in with a tripod and video camera. And just go sit over in the corner and set up. And it's amazing how the whole spirit of meetings has changed since I started showing up with a video camera. There's nobody hollering, don't worry, we're going to polish all this stuff up before the elected officials see it anymore. But now they've tried to, NC Tomorrow, this also has just recently raised its head. Oh, it's I actually went to search for one of the other region's website, and this is what I got, was their connection to the regional councils.
And that's under Diener.
Yeah, kind of.
Kind of, right.
Everything they do, they get funding from multiple sources, which makes it so much harder for you to actually figure out who's paying for what. And they do that through the purpose, and it's what we found out about a lot of these things. They do it simply because they don't want anybody to be able to follow the trail. Like I said, bureaucrats, biggest important thing to do, keep a job. So the less that Joe Public understands about what they're doing, the better they are.
Could I ask a question?
Yes, ma'am.
Could you speak again to this standardized web platform? Is that actually being considered as a new law?
That's actually being considered as a way to save state funding, because it will put them all on in other words, they'll have a single person in the IT world set up a web platform that then every one of the regional councils will play in. There's a reason why that was
So
something.
they have to standardize what they're doing.
Correct. And there's a reason for that. If you go to Southwestern, which is the one Murphy, Cherokee County, all the way up in far western. The last time I checked, which was 3 weeks ago, the most recent event they had on their meeting and events calendar was their 2010 Christmas dinner.
Haven't been busy, haven't
You go to most of their calendars and they're empty. That's the other thing that is going to be is in some of the paperwork that's written on this potential legislation, is that they will be required to have a prominent calendar button on the home page of the new web platform, and that there will be legal penalties for not maintaining a current and up-to-date calendar.
Okay, and how did this all get started, this standardizing and making them be accountable, more or less?
I went and sat down in my senator's office and said, Warren, you're going to have to get something done about this, or I'm just going to continue to pillory you to death.
Okay, so he understood the severity of the whole thing and said this has got to stop,
Let
or
me
we're
tell
going to
you-
wrangle them.
See, this is the funny, it's not funny, it's not funny worth a damn. This is the really big problem about this. The legislation was done in 1972. It's the last time our state legislature had anything to do with it.
That was the Department of Administration? Okay.
They have basically, because what they do is they'll go get state grants. Typically the state grants they get are some sort of a match for a federal grant. It's basically how the federal government has undermined state governments being involved in, and basically has gone right around the states, right into local government. Well, you know, and I'll give them credit, whoever it was that put this together, and you know, I've been told everybody from the Rockefeller Foundation, the Ford Foundation's involved. I mean, the big nonprofit supporters in the country. But as they put this whole thing together, they kept building and building on these things. They left the state code behind. So in my regular pilgrimages to Raleigh this year, I carry information about councils of government. I'm going to tell you, folks, 75% of the people serving in the state legislature don't know what they are. And they really, and in their defense, because it's not something that's directly on their radar screen regularly, And when you're getting hit with 1,800 bills in 3 months at the state legislative level, you're not looking for other stuff to be getting involved in. Yeah, Mark?
Well, you've touched on the real interesting thing about this whole thing. The Ford Foundation and the big foundations are all tied into the United Nations.
Correct.
And they want Agenda 21 implemented worldwide.
Correct.
And these guys, I guarantee you, if you look at the leadership of our local council of government, they came from one of the big foundations. They're educated.
I don't know where Mr. Prosser came from.
That's where these guys come from, and they just all of a sudden they pop up in these communities, and they're, when you hear sustainable anything, that's Agenda 21.
Well, this is the thing that you also will find. Most people don't get jobs working with these unless they are APA certified, American Planning Association. They have been, 70 of the 100 largest universities in the country now have a curriculum for planning. Well, they call it planning. They've started trying to keep the buzzwords out of it now. We went through the thing with Connect Our Future and how much, sustainable was the only place that the word sustainable was mentioned was the fact that they had to put that it was a Health and Human Services Sustainable Communities Grant.
I can add to that too a little bit if you want.
Sure.
When Clinton put in the Agenda 21 system into our federal government, he granted in a federal grant to the American Planning Association millions of dollars and directed them to use the money to create something called Growing Smart, a legislative guidebook. And this was in 1993. And ever since then, every planner that works for every city and every county who has certification with the American Planning Association is schooled in nothing else but that. So you think that somebody who's an urban planner or a rural planner would have gone to school to learn how to think and create some kind of planning.
No, they learn to go through the guidelines.
They've been indoctrinated to nothing else but smart card.
They just go and hire one. There's so many coming out of the colleges
Exactly.
now.
Right. So that's
You
all
post
they
a
know.
job and you got 10 people are ready to sign you up for
See why I'm glad Cheryl's on the same side of the team as we are.
So the planning department in Charlotte or in Gastonia or in any other town has planners who are APA certified.
They even now started sending their receptionists, their steno pool, whatever you want to call it. They are now, the American Planning Association now has mobile training groups that goes out and do seminars at these various organizations. And I thought this was really cute. First off, this evidently is part of the new thing. This is related to the next thing with NC tomorrow is the North Carolina Building Communities Together, which is the Comprehensive Economic Development Strategy. Now, I have found one of the places where the devil lives. It's in Chapel Hill, and it's called the SAS Institute. You start digging, and these people are into every bit of this. It's amazing where they just show up. And that's one of the things, like working on some of the stuff we're working on now. I want to start getting FOIA requests of asking people who first made contact, like with the situation with the white I-77. Did Parson and Vickerhoff bring themselves into the game, or did somebody bring them in? But that'll be another story. But I thought this was really cute because it's the Charm City Circulator is the name of their bus system. And it's a hybrid, and it's fast, friendly, and free. Now, you know something? I do business with a company that builds buses. That hybrid bus right there is about $780,000 if you go with the simple interior.
Yeah.
Now, Tacoma, Washington, they did really nice ones. First off, they've got some plug-ins as well as some hybrids, and they put a news TV screen in the back of every seat. Like you got in your car with the DVD, so you can watch CNN while you're out. And in that particular city, that is the only channel that shows on their in-bus movie route.
At least it's not MSNBC.
But this is something to watch. We'll start watching for that lovely little logo up there in the corner. Because we're building communities for tomorrow's jobs. Now, I've watched how government tries to plan things, you know, like on that scale. And typically they'll plan it, and then those of us that operate in the free market will, in half the time they ever get their plan in place, will figure out a way to work around it. It's kind of unproductive, but you know, it's what we do. Those, you know, us nasty free market people, because they don't like us. Because you don't conform properly if you actually think outside of their planning box.
That's true.
But this is going to be coming hot and heavy, and I called somebody to ask about it Friday, and he said, oh yeah, they're getting ready to do a big rollout, and SAS is pushing it, and the whole thing is that comprehensive economic development strategy, that's one of the next big federal programs that you're going to start seeing. You will start seeing things pop up on your radar screen about your comprehensive economic development strategy, which probably means that wherever they're trying to strategize and develop something, there will be no jobs. So look where you don't see CEDS. Unless you want to work for the government.
So this is a job killer.
Well, as far as I'm concerned, everything you do is a job killer, because every job, you know, first rule of government can't give anything to anybody it doesn't take from somebody else first.
The other name they're coming up with besides this comprehensive economic development is the call tag is resilient cities. Because everybody caught on to the sustainable development, they changed the name. So now it's resilience. How do you look for that?
Has anybody here looked at Vancouver, British Columbia? Just go out and Google it, look at their website. They are all about Agenda 20.
Oh yeah. Oh, Canada's 10 years ahead of us on all this.
But because they are so far out in the western part, they're stacked and packed. Everybody's on bikes. They have their own little community gardens, and what they don't use in their community gets sold to the next community down the road. Everybody has an assigned job, and you go on and you can look at all the jobs that are going to be available and what you need as far as experience and education to do it. And it's frightening. This is slavery in the 21st century.
Oh, exactly. Oh, it's my point on this is what they are doing is absolutely insidious, and that is they are removing the next two generations' ability to do anything in their own mind, because it's all going to be planned and put in the book before your grandchildren are ever born. I mean, that's their whole plan. They right now, Lake Norman RPO, which may or may not still exist after Wednesday. This is going to be an interesting week, but they're doing 2040 and 2045 transportation planning. The current comprehensive land use plans that for your county or your city to try and do anything to obtain federal grants, and sadly until we start weaning the system, that's not going to change. You've got to be plugged into these things. You've got, you know, you don't get there without being part of one of these organizations and signing up for all the wonderful stuff and having your people trained and having X number of APA trained people in your office. You just don't get there. I mean, that's what they've done, and it's, you know, comprehensive transportation plan. Ours that we just finished having reapproved was 2035 for Cleveland County. We've got a loop railroad around Shelby in Cleveland County as part of our comprehensive transportation plan.
Are you serious?
Yes, ma'am.
And then you've probably got 4 streets that crisscross the whole thing, so it becomes a walking community.
Oh, the walkability is that's just.
Go out and look at Vancouver, it's all there.
Well, see,
it's all there.
If you talk to people within Central Iowa, they'll tell you that Burkdale, they feel like Burkdale and Huntersville is the ultimate community. Because as long as you're willing to work minimum wage or slightly over, unless you get into management in a retail or service operation, you never have to cross the street.
Where is this again?
Burkdale. Exit 25 off of I-77 north, but go before 4 or
It's
after
lovely.
7.
Except except to live there, you can't afford the rents and the condos that are above the shops.
Oh, no.
Those things start at $1,000 a month and go up to like $3,000.
So the boy shoveling sandwiches at Jason's across the street is probably not
upstairs.
Yeah.
He's not living upstairs.
I'll probably have.
Well, that's not true. He can live in there with 4 or 5 of his friends.
Yeah, they won't.
Not according to the lease.
Oh, I can't. Okay.
The lease agreements limit the number of people in the condo.
Yep.
And it's based on the number of bedrooms.
That's to keep out the riffraff.
No, that's to keep
I
10 people from sharing,
Yeah.
one
But-
unit.
Surviving.
This sort of, what now? What do we do? First one is, talk to your local elected officials. Find out who your person is from your city, council, town. I mean, every local government, every county government in that 9-county area has a seat on the board of delegates with Central Iowa Council of Governments. The other thing they do is our good friends at MUMPO. Everybody remember MUMPO? Guess who administers the whole operations of MUMPO? Central Iowa Council of Governments.
Oh, no wonder they were so
Yeah.
cordial at the last meeting. Okay.
They also run Lake Norman RPO. Matter of fact, the city of Gastonia has historically run the Gaston MPO, but now I understand there is a negotiation. What happens Wednesday night's going to have a lot to do with this, but they're negotiating now with Central Iowa to take over their administrative operations. But that's what they do. They find a place that they can go in and get their whatever percentage off the top, and they'll apply for and administer particular grants, and everybody goes on happy, and it's all free federal money. So the local elected official says, I just got you a new $5 million HUD sustainable or HHS Sustainable Communities grant. See what a good job I'm doing as your elected official. And of course, everybody just sees it, and that's the headline you see in the paper that seriously, when you start seeing things about local funding of anything that the government is directly doing, if you start pulling up grant apps, you'll find Central Iowa Council of Governments' name all over it. I mean, that's what they do. We've got to start holding our local elected officials that sit on these boards accountable. And that means we got to show up, folks. We got to pay attention. Because they've been doing, you got to understand, they have been building this machine for 41 years now, since it was legally codified in the state of North Carolina. So they're into their second, in some cases third generation of these planning bureaucrats that have been basically inbred in the system over this last 40 years.
Well, you know, we've got McCrory in the governor's mansion. We've got, you know, Tillis and Berger out there, and I guarantee you they know who the central council governments are. They know who these guys
They do now.
Sure
They do.
Oh, McCrory does for sure.
Oh yeah,
Because he was right in there. I mean, you know,
His whole career.
You go back about 10 years into the minutes of Central Iowa Council of Government meetings, which you can find if you dig far enough. And you will find he was a regular attendee
No, but
and contributor to
Look, the people of North Carolina, the people of North Carolina have elected Republicans to run this state. They can do away with all this crap. They can get rid of all of it.
Well,
They can.
they can over
They can.
time.
Yeah, and they can start.
Well, that's why, like I said, and Cheryl and I talked about this, a year ago, I guess, close to it. I says, I'm going to go and we've got to start building the blocks. We've got to understand, we've got a 128-year bureaucratic machine that's been built by one-party rule in this state. And if you go up and spend time in Raleigh, you'll find out they spend more time having to disassemble this piece and that piece before they can do anything.
The problem is McCrory loves these guys.
Well, I'm sure he does.
Yeah,
They're probably big contributors.
sure.
But when I talked to Kathy Harrington about this, she said that there are places in the state that love these councils of governments.
Sure.
And it's because they don't want to bother with the inside the work of doing their own
Grant writing.
And they have no idea what it's actually costing them. So that's, sort of like the whole joke about healthcare. You think free healthcare is great. How are you going to have free healthcare plus pay for a government operation to run it?
So she said, we'll never get rid of them as long as you have people that want to depend on it. Sure.
But the key to it, like I said, we've got to show up. We've got to touch our local elected officials. I mean, I'll have to say I'm so proud of my county commissioner that sits on Lake Norman RPO because he votes against the board about 90% of the time. And now he's got 3 or 4 more that are starting to listen to him. Because they're seeing there's some things we've been able to stay out of in Cleveland County that the other people in the RPO are going, how'd you do that? I mean, prime example, comprehensive transportation plan. You have to have a comprehensive transportation plan for your city and your county. Now, in a rural county like Cleveland County, it's a comprehensive transportation plan for the whole county. We will be writing our own comprehensive transportation plan through a course of study that's being set up at Cleveland Community College. Myself and my county commissioner got online one day and we contacted somebody with Wayne State University who wrote the original outline document for a comprehensive transportation plan. He says, yeah, it's free software, the government paid for it, we'll just send you a copy of it.
Wow.
It's all, I mean, all this stuff is out there. They don't want you to know that any of this is out there. They want you to believe that, well, that's the one for Central Iowa. This whole thing, in flames and going down the tube.
If you look at this, the comprehensive plan for Santa Monica, California, it's the same thing as Charlotte, North Carolina. All these plans are basically the same formula.
Because the APA has to put their stamp on it before the federal government even will talk to you about the transportation grants or construction grants that go with it.
Right.
The thing that got my people and our elected officials in our county signed up, which we have not signed on to Connect Our Future, and I've been assured by 4 of my 5 county commissioners we will not, was one of the things that they outline is Connect Our Future is a totally comprehensive transportation, land, and water use outline plan. Well, we've been trying for 22 years to build a new reservoir in Upper Cleveland County, and we finally got to the point we've got people in Raleigh that are working with us to make it happen. And I was point blank told by one of the people in Central Iowa, well, if this thing totally gets put in place, there's probably not going to be any new reservoirs built. Even though we have an abundance of water in Cleveland County, we've got, the upper half of the county total population is like 6,000 for, an area half the size of Mecklenburg. And we've got 2 rivers that converge there that will make a beautiful 2,700 acre reservoir. But if this gets in the way, we won't get it. And bottom line is, for the future economic development of our county, that's our one thing that some industries have held over our head, that we just have a potential. The last time we had a major drought, we were having to go out and buy water from other cities and municipalities within the county. But
So these guys essentially have become their own little shadow government.
they are the shadow government. They are Agenda 21 implementation on the ground.
Unelected, unaccountable.
Bingo. They are. But see, they do this thing, what they call tacit approval. And that is that they put the plans together, and then, as I call it, you've got 2 groups within an RPO, an MPO, or a COG. You've got Group 1, which is that technical coordinating committee. Those are your planners, your staffers, direct employees of your local and county governments. We call them the sausage makers, because they take all of this stuff that they go out and data mine and find for their area, and they make sausage. Everybody's heard the old saying, if you ever saw them make sausage, you'd never eat it again. Well, they're the ones that put it in a nice, pretty package and roll it out, and then they bring in on a quarterly or monthly basis, depending on how their structure is, what I refer to as the breakfast club. And that's the TAC. And they come in, and everything that they lay out for these elected officials is, we're going to qualify for this federal grant and this state grant, and it's not going to, it's not going to affect your county tax base, and it's going to help supplement this, and that's what they do. That's their job. Now, how we allowed our government to evolve to the point where there are people in government that are, and again, the NGO thing. The only thing that's been helpful is, at least even as an NGO, they do have to answer to certain things like Freedom of Information Act requests, because we're fortunate in North Carolina, we've got one of the tightest open meetings or open information laws in the state. But they're everywhere. The next thing is, and let's see what happens with the legislation. This year, I know that Tim Moffitt, who is the chair of the House Regulatory Reform Committee, and folks, by the end of this session, you're going to see a lot of stuff you really like come out of that committee. You're going to see about 60 state agencies just disappear. So they're doing well, in the 2011-2012 session, Debbie Perry, who by disclosure my former senator, they set her up a special committee in the North Carolina State Senate last year that was the Government Reduction Committee. I know that sounds strange. She went after anything that was in the budget but was not legislatively required. And on July 1, 2011, when this current, now soon ending biennial budget went into place, there were 114 state commissions, committees, and boards that just didn't exist. There were at least 5 of those that had board of directors members that were drawing 6-figure salaries that had not met in the previous 4 years. And amazingly, if you go back and look at the foundation, now the COGs have changed a little bit. If you go back and start digging into the deep archives, every executive director for a council of government in the state of North Carolina was related to a former governor, former speaker, or former president of the Senate, or one of their high dollar contributors. But they can't get a real job, so we're going to start these new councils of government and we'll just give them an executive director job. I'm going to guess that from the numbers we were putting together, Bill Dustin, the former executive director of CCOG, was probably knocking down somewhere between $300,000 and $500,000 a year plus expenses. Because, you see that 2.8 million 24 employees, but you've also got to figure there's X number of $25,000 a year typists and researchers and part-time people. But show up. That's all I can ask you to do. Pay attention.
Now the director's name is Jim Frost. If you see his name on anything to do with your government, go
Run.
there. Go there and
P-R-O-S-S-E-R. Yes, ma'am.
P-R-O-S-S-E-R.
Well, Jim Foster runs he used to run the vet center. Is he now head?
He's the executive director of Central Line Council of Government.
That's the same
When
Jim
did that
Foster.
start?
He's retired Air Force.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think he is.
He is.
Is that just started?
He's been there, I guess, has to be almost a year now.
Oh, I thought, well, he can't do that and be the Mecklenburg County Vet Center too. I thought that's where he was.
Yeah, that's what I
Good
know.
call.
Never say,
Oh,
don't, never
wait,
say
wait,
never.
wait, sorry.
Never say can't.
Okay.
Thank you.